Mansfield Park by Jane Austen, Fanny Price. Thinking about the heroine, Fanny Price. Fanny has been a problematic heroine for many readers and many critics, especially I think during the course of the later 20th century and also now in the 21st century. We discussed in the introductory video the idea that Jane Austen had written in a letter to her sister Cassandra that Mansfield Park is a novel about ordination. Ordination features, it's a prominent theme in the novel, and also Anglicanism, Christianity as a way of life. At this period in the early 19th century, and how it manifests, how it appears in the activities, how it appears in the day-to-day interactions and expectations that people have of one another within the social group of the gentry and above. Christianity itself doesn't feature hugely in the novel, but the society that Christianity produces, the way in which Christianity is integral to the lifestyle and the mindset of the people that we see in Jane Austen's novels, according to the precepts of the early 19th century, is highly present in this novel. It's really articulated. It's implicit in all of Jane Austen's novels and in many novels written at the period and really through the course of the 19th century, certainly up until 1870. The vast majority of novels will be written with a viewpoint that sees society and the values of society from a Christianized perspective. But it is, again, the Christian perspective of people living at a certain period in history. It wouldn't be the same perspective as Christians would, for the most part, share in modern societies, especially in Europe or in America. So if we accept that the novel is deliberately discussing the role, the implicit role of Christianity in the society of England, Great Britain at this period, there's a possibility, therefore, that Fanny actually is illustrating aspects of Christianity through her characterization. We can see in Fanny that she has certain qualities that are typical of the traditional Christian heroine. She is weak, she's sickly, she's faint. In other words, she's not fully present within the carnal manifestation of her spirit on earth. She's not entirely embodied. She is somewhat unearthly, somewhat heavenly, somewhat spiritual as a result. If the spirit isn't strongly intertwined with the physical existence, that individual may be much less interested in carnal desires, such as the 7 deadly sins when they're taken to excess. They will be less interested in materialistic values, such as status, display of property, display of fashionability, interest in money, making money, ambition, fame. All of these things will be less important if someone is less engaged with their physical body and therefore less engaged with the material manifestation of earthly things here on this planet as opposed to above in heaven. So we can, from all of this, gauge that Fanny is rather less prone to being sinful than the other inhabitants of Mansfield Park. She's a lot less prone to being sinful than Mary Crawford and Henry Crawford, who are really quite carnal. Mary's physicality, Mary's energy, Mary's health, Mary's animal spirits, for want of a better expression, are really tangibly conveyed within the plot. And Henry as well comes over as a man who's, you know, quite comfortable with being in a male body and sees the world from that perspective, really, in many respects. He knows the power of his own attractiveness, and he's got a great deal of vanity around proving that to himself on different occasions. Returning to Fanny, another prominent characteristic in Fanny's makeup is her meekness. And again, meekness was a highly prized quality in a Christian woman at this period, and would continue to be so for the best part of the next century, really, for the majority of people. Fanny is very meek. Fanny, apart from anything else, often doesn't speak. She certainly doesn't assert her sense of being treated unfairly. She doesn't assert her wants, her needs, her desires. She simply goes about very meekly, very subserviently. However, as we may be aware, there is that sort of famous quotation, "The meek shall inherit the earth." And so this is another way in which we perhaps might see that Fanny is intended to be interpreted as a very Christian heroine. There's an endeavour to represent who a person is if they conform to this model. The meekness will show up in ways where Fanny is hesitant, where she's uncertain, tractable, timorous. I think Fanny is open, or has been not open to, but so much as Fanny has been judged by certain critics as being priggish. Harding has judged her as priggish. Some people see her as goody-goody and very moralistic. Again, some of this is to do with changing moral codes across eras, and also perhaps not taking into account fully the personality type that was recognised as being a fully obedient Christian woman, obedient to the precepts of religion, but also obedient to the subservient position that Christianity places women in against men. So within these restrictions that Fanny is placed by needing to conform to a certain model of being very Christian, in fact she conducts herself with a fair degree of self-possession, individuality, and independence. Fanny doesn't always say what she thinks, but she usually will act according to what she believes is right, or if she can't act according to what she believes is right, she will not act at all. Literally, in that she doesn't act in the play, or she just especially doesn't want to. And also in her everyday actions, I also mean. Fanny, of course, resists the quite coercive attempts on the part of Mansfield Park and the patriarchal system there to marry Henry Crawford. She holds out against that with a lot of strenuousness. It's the trial that she has to suffer as a Christian heroine or stroke saint. She has to undergo the suffering, the penance of going to Portsmouth and living at a level that she finds difficult to feel at ease with, having enjoyed the luxury of Mansfield Park for so many years now. But it is a test of Fanny's strength, whether or not she can hold out against the temptations being put towards her with regard to marrying Henry Crawford. And one of the temptations is not so much that what she's going to receive as a result of marrying Henry Crawford. There's a slight overturn of concepts here, which is typical of Jane Austen in any case, but it's not so much what she will gain by marrying Henry as what she will lose if she doesn't marry Henry. That may induce her to not be able to withstand the penance. So if she's going to be cut off from the family at Mansfield Park, of whom she's grown fond and whom she misses, she's going to be cut off from that world and that life and that lifestyle, then she may be tempted to marry Henry. But she's not, on the surface of it, tempted to marry Henry because she'll gain status as a married woman, because Henry is well off, because she'll have her own house that she can be mistress of and control how things are run and choose who she invites, choose who the company is and who the company isn't, and get away from Mrs. Norris. It's not so much the things that she'll be able to gain as the things that she will lose that could influence her to marry Henry. There are signs that she's gradually beginning to give way a little bit. However, whether these would have gone all the way to actually walking up the aisle with Henry and saying yes, slightly different matter, I think, from a little bit Fanny, as she misses Mansfield Park, wavering towards enjoying being with Henry because at least he's from that world, he's from that milieu. However, it's clearly intended as a temptation. As I say, Fanny is submissive. She's peculiarly submissive to Mrs. Norris, who again is a hair shirt that Fanny has to wear in order to be able to enjoy a life at Mansfield Park at all. Fanny, though, will stand out against Mrs. Norris despite the vituperative nature of Mrs. Norris's criticism and constant negation of who Fanny is. Fanny does stand out against Mrs. Norris when it comes to taking a moral action that Fanny doesn't agree with. Mrs. Norris thinks that Fanny should always be the lowest and the last. Again, there's a religious ring to this, isn't there? Fanny should always be humble, she should always be meek. And that is the ideal, really, of a Christian man or woman, that they are humble, that they don't value worldly status, they don't value how they're perceived in terms of worldly status. But in some ways, by telling Fanny that she should be in this place, and by the fact that Fanny actually easily fits into this place, easily fits into this space, Mrs. Norris in some ways exalts Fanny as being an exemplary Christian and Christian woman. As I say, the meek shall inherit the earth, and whilst Fanny doesn't end up inheriting the earth, in some ways, although not the material ways, she does end up inheriting Mansfield Park. She does become the one who, at least for a period, people turn to at Mansfield Park in order to be guided about what would be the best course of action, how would be the best way in which to proceed in lots of different areas. However, crucially, Fanny and Edmund will not inherit Mansfield Park. They are perhaps the moral inheritors of Mansfield Park, but the law of primogeniture will prevent Edmund, who is really a more appropriate future guardian of the house and the estates than Tom. Primogeniture prevents Edmund from inheriting. And the theme of primogeniture, the unfairness of primogeniture, the unjustness of it, usually towards women, that Jane Austen brings out in her novels. Again here, I think this is a very deliberate criticism of the rules of primogeniture.